It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take command. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. What a game. What a freaking game, Logan. We did 3.5 hours of radio this morning leading into that 3.5 hour football game. And we could probably talk about it for 3.5 more hours if we didn't want our wives to divorce us. So we'll stick to just a half hour here as we wrap up this game. And what a game it was. Commanders 35, Broncos 33, a Hail Mary at the end, successful, a 2-point conversion. Don't look at Benjamin St. Houston where his other hand was. That was not, but ultimately a win for Washington that shows heart, grit, but also two words that keep coming to mind for me, Logan, are resilience and maturity.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. I think, someone said, I got a text from a buddy right after the game, and he was like, shout out to Doug, by the way. But he was like,
what's up, Doug?
Yeah, and he was like, I don't know how to feel about this. And, I don't know, he's like, I feel like a better team would exploit some of the weaknesses and blah, blah, blah. And I totally get where he's coming from with that. But I'm also like the resilience and the maturity of this team. Like those two words you just said have been like in my brain since the Logan Thomas touchdown. Like that is something that doesn't happen to this team in years past. They don't have that resiliency. They don't have that maturity. They don't have the courage to kind of go out and battle for four quarters, even though everything's kind of tilted against them. I don't know if that's coaching. I don't know what that is. I definitely think coaching, EB's presence has definitely played a huge role in that. The conditioning also, I think, is a huge factor. But yeah, I look at that and I say, I'm in total agreement with you. Like, this is something that is very unique. It feels very unique. And obviously it's 2 games, long season ahead. But I think this is a huge character kind of defining moment or establishing moment for this team. And it's something that, again, when I was playing, I didn't really feel it when I was here. And since covering the team, I didn't feel it. And this is going to be a big deal and something that pays dividends for them moving forward for sure.
I think there's so many places you can point. You have to give credit to the head coach. There's other things about this game that specifically the decision to, as he is poking over your left shoulder there, not address the long snapping situation.
Oh, yeah,
before that, there's nothing to sweat about if there's an extra field goal on the board.
Yeah.
I think there's a coaching decision in the middle of that second half where he decides to try the 59-yarder instead of punting. I don't like either of those decisions. But when it comes to the character of the team, it obviously starts with the head coach. It then goes to Eric Bieniemy for sure. His impact on this team is massive. The leadership of guys. Yeah, Jack as well. I think that his steady demeanor, like I can imagine Del Rio after they're down 21-3, just going to his guys and going, long football game, boys. Been around this thing a long time. And so, yeah, absolutely with Del Rio. I think the leadership of Allen and McLaurin, obviously like the character and kind of the demeanor of those two men, certainly. But I also think that Sam Howell has a lot to do with this. And not just because he is the quarterback, like doing the physical quarterbacking, but he is so steady. And there's, I think, a lot of great stuff from him in this game. I think there's a lot of the stuff where you're like, dude, you got to start like that's. I don't want to say you want to start cleaning up. It's his 3rd career start. Let me self-edit there. But like the stuff where you're like, that's young quarterback stuff. If he doesn't get better at that stuff, I don't know how long his career will be as a starter in the league. Some of the footwork and the timing and some of the things that get off kilter a little bit. But from a mentality and a demeanor standpoint, from a belief standpoint, I think he has a massive role to play in this. And I don't think that's overstating it, even though he is just a 3-game starter now in the NFL.
Yeah, I was talking to B-Mitch about this on the postgame show. And it's like when you've got that quarterback who's just like the leader of the group, I felt like this with a little bit with like Matt Ryan, a little bit with Deshaun Watson. Like there's like this calm composure. Like the world it seems like the world could be on fire for those guys. And they are just like, you look to him and like, oh, he's good. Like, we're good. You know what I'm saying? And I think Sam has a little bit of that, like you hear it in his press conferences, you hear it kind of the way guys talk about him on the field. Like you see it in his demeanor. Like I never really felt like the body language got bad. He just was like, we're out here, we're going to just keep chopping wood. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And I think there's that's special. That's a special person to do that. And again, it's not just him. It's not just the coaches. It's everything. And, I just think like that Jamin Davis forced fumble, like how many times have we seen someone make a play and then nothing happens off of it. Nothing happens because of it. And then they go down, and then Logan Thomas makes maybe the catch of the year, like unconscious holding onto the football. And like they do something with it. They get the 2-point conversion. They did everything that they set out to do. And all of a sudden, it's not just the fumble. It's not just the catch. It's not just the 2-point conversion. It's all those things coming together and a belief in the offense. And then it creates a belief in the defense. It creates an energy and a momentum. And I know PFF and all these analytic nerds, like they get freaked out about the word momentum because it's not a quantifiable thing.
Yeah.
In this game, like you see it, you see what's going on there. And like, having played and been in those situations, like you feel like you're in a dark pit when it's 21-3 and you're like, there's nothing we can do to get out of it. And then slowly the light starts to creep in and you're like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe we can get out of here. And then again, you can't quantify it. You can't talk about it. But to get those 3 plays in succession, in terms of sequence of the game,
right,
in conjunction with the leadership, I'm just telling you from having been in those situations a lot as a player, and it's incredibly challenging to see that turn the way it did. And it just, again, it speaks to something. I don't know what it is. And if I did know what it was, I'd be making a ton of money coaching. But, there is something there that is very special.
Without question. And like, I laugh because, we both love PFF and the numbers and the data. And it's incredibly valuable as a resource. But if you think momentum isn't real, you've never played sports. And if you think like being in the zone isn't real, you've never played sports. If I can get in the zone a couple of times in my life, shooting threes in a pickup game, I can't imagine what it feels like to be Steph Curry when the basket feels like the Pacific Ocean. Right. So like, that stuff is real. And it's, it is a combination. Like eventually maybe some other nerds will be able to quantify it in terms of, the emotional, like a mix of adrenaline and nerves. And I don't know, there's probably like some hormonal stuff that happens. Like the inner chemistry of the human body is pretty freaking wild. That's for a different podcast. But like, there's no doubt that stuff in some form or fashion combines into being in the zone and self-belief and like that ability to perform at a higher level. A couple of other things that you hit on there, and then I want to kind of wrap up on Howell. Kareem Jackson can get suspended for a game, at least in my book. That hit on Logan Thomas is so dirty, and he's now done it 2 weeks in a row.
Oh, did you do it last week as well?
Yeah, he was flagged for. I think he's the one who knocked out Jacoby Myers last week.
Late
in that game, and so like if you are going to play football, is a violent game. Is a collision sport, not a contact sport. That's all fine. But there is a respect of humanity and people's health and well-being that I think you should just like is part of being a pro. And if you're going to play like that, you don't belong in the pros. You're not a pro. And so suspend him.
And so I'm like a little bit, old school blue collar, like, the targeting stuff. I think it's valuable. I think it's important. But that was beyond anything. That was just an unsafe play from start to finish. Like, I don't know. Like you might have closed.
He's thinking, I got to separate man from ball. No, you don't. You lost the rep. You're separating man from consciousness. Don't do that.
But also, like your eyes are closed then, because if I'm trying to separate you from the ball, I'm trying to strike the football. I'm not trying to hit you with my shoulder pad and helmet. And like while I'm turning, it was unsafe for him. It was unsafe for him. It was unsafe for Logan. And I agree with you. Like, and again, I'm a little bit. I'm always apologetic towards the defender in these situations. Most of the time, that felt different. You know what I mean?
He launched. It was helmet. It was egregiously late. It was dirty.
And for his own safety, man, he's going to hurt himself if he's not being careful there. So I agree with you. That was a pretty intense. I haven't seen a hit like that in a very long time. And so hopefully Logan Thomas is okay. It looks like he's okay. And I agree, like there needs to be some type of some punishment for that, I think. So
yeah, without question. As for Howell himself, was it 30 times in the first half?
Yeah.
That's nuts. Way more efficient, obviously, in the second. That tends to happen when you don't throw it 30 times.
Yep.
But you see some of the special arm talent. I think you do see of the hurried up, like he's patting the ball in the pocket. Like you made a great point throughout the week on the podcast. There's no progression. There's no footwork that calls for patting the ball twice in the pocket. Yeah. So you definitely saw, especially in the first half, some of that. But what do you make of his ability to just keep at it and make some of these big time major throws, including obviously the showcase is the touchdown to Terry?
Yeah, man. I mean, like it's like we were talking about this on the pregame, and I've talked about this. Like he's learning the process, right? Like the more exposure he has to NFL defenses, the more he's going to understand like where the ball needs to go. Like I always think back to to Tom Brady, like the stories I've heard about Tom Brady, about him based on the coverage, kind of not predetermining, but having a notion of where the ball should go and how long it should take the ball to get there. And I think that is something that just comes with experience, like living to play another day, living to fight another down, and understanding when that clock goes off. Like it gives me anxiety as a guy who was a former pass protector and as a guy who coaches offensive line, to see him back there and know the ball needs to be out and be feeling it. And and like the seconds ticking by, it's not actual seconds, but like the 1.5 seconds extra that he's in there, I'm just like, that needs to be expedited a little bit, and I think some of that's play calling. I think some of it also comes off of, I think EB is in this state where he's thinking a lot about Kansas City, and I think it's not a coincidence that the offense gets a little bit more effective when you're running the football. And I know there's a lot of people that from an analytics perspective would say you should never run the football because there's no added value. But my point here is that, like, it just limits some of the big decisions for the quarterback, right? Especially when you're being semi-effective with it. You're just limiting the quarterback's decision-making processes, right? Like, we watched that Atlanta game today with Desmond Ridder, and, like, he doesn't have to throw the ball a whole bunch, And so when he does, and he can kind of put himself out there and be leveraged and make those nice throws, it's because he's kind of built up a stability in the offense that comes from running the football. And I think you saw that a little bit in the second half, not entirely, but a little bit in the second half. You saw the screen game come alive. Again, they are not pushing the ball down the field. They're getting the ball out of his hand. They're running the football better. They find easy throws. And then when it's time, and Sam knows we're calling this drop back pass, I can pat the ball twice. The defensive line's fatigued. They don't have their ears back the same way. And it just allows for a more effective, productive second half, I think. And, it'll be really, I think that's something I'm really excited to do, is like watch the all 22 and be like, what is real and what's just my perception coming out of the game.
What anyone who says that you should never run the football is
the math says don't.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
It doesn't, though. Like that's the thing, is like the results say that because the EPA and the yards per play and any number you look at is better on pass plays than run plays, but it takes away the impact that running the football has on passing the football. Like there's a schematic impact that you have when you have to respect the run that opens up larger windows. And it also goes to the fact that if you tell me to succeed in my task, I have to make 45 correct decisions, and any one that's incorrect could totally change my fortunes, or I have to make 25. Give me the task that's 25. And that's exactly what you're talking about, because the dramatic change of an interception or a sack fumble like we saw last week, like those are massive plays that typically don't come in the run game. Even if you turn it over in the run game, it's like scored on the pile and everybody falls on it and the ball's dead where it is. And that sucks, but it happens less often than an interception. Like fumble percentages are lower than interception percentages. Sure. So there is a mitigation of risk and also making the job easier and allowing for mental clarity of the quarterback that comes with running the football. And it also, those numbers do not reflect something that you could talk about far better than me, but that offensive linemen prefer going forward compared to backwards. Like if you are an offensive lineman and you get to fire off the ball and hit someone, that's way better than getting back in your pass protection stance and having someone run into you. Especially if a guy's going to just bull rush you all game and run into your face. Like that doesn't sound very fun. So I think in the second half, you see that, and you see by the end of the game how worn down Denver is. You see Brian Robinson start to gash, and then you also get the efficacy of something like the screen game, like that screen to Gibson and the one to Robinson. There's two big ones in the game.
Big one.
Like those things get out because Denver doesn't know which way is up. They're run here, pass there. If we play up, they run it. We play back, they run it. If we play up, they throw it over our heads. Like EB got into a rhythm in this game, and considering they are literally childhood friends, that is no way to treat your friend the way EB has treated Vance Joseph over the years. And he had his number again today with Howell, and they put up 35. But a lot of that obviously does come. I mean, I think you made a great point. We were texting. It starts with a 2-minute. I mean, obviously it kind of starts with the Logan Thomas touchdown, but that 2-minute drive they put together at the end of the half, that honey hole shot to John Bates on the sideline.
Crazy.
What a throw. But really from that point on, Bieniemy was just in a rhythm, and it comes with that balance to keep Denver off balance, and it opens up the big stuff that results in pass plays having a better EPA than run game or your run plays by the end of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think the offense was poor to start. I think they moved the ball pretty effectively on the first two drives. They just didn't finish the way they needed to finish, which is which is tough because like I've been a part of offenses. I think the offense in 2010 and 2011 with Kyle at the helm here when I was in Washington was, I think, the most productive offense from a yardage standpoint, or top 4, but we were like 25th in points. So that, you know, obviously that dynamic changes from an offensive efficiency standpoint. And you saw that in the game. The other thing I'm really excited to go back and look at is like what kind of coverage structures Denver was playing, because it seemed like they were playing not man, but some softer coverage structures that were causing Sam to hold the football. And usually when you're doing that, you've got like, you know, a split safety look, you're playing Tampa 2, you're playing cover 3 with a lurk guy, and the coverage structures are clouding windows. And I kind of wonder if like when they start running the football, Vance Joseph says, shoot, we can't have them gashing us like this. Let's commit more resources to stopping the run. And let's get out of some of these better coverage personnels. And then that opens up some of the passing game. And I don't know. We won't know that for sure until we watch the All-22. But I do think that's another thing that could have potentially impacted the effectiveness of the offense in the second half. So, again, like great performance by EB, you know, in terms of calling and changing stuff. But also, like, the whole group was incredibly resilient. You know, the offensive line, man, faced a ton of adversity early. And they looked awesome in the second half of that game. And so, kudos to that group, and B-Rob running the way he did, the screen. It was so nice to see Gibson catch that screen. Nick Gates getting out with the little bump, you know, on the rat killer, they call those guys. So killing those rats because, you know, pursuit kills screens. And so preventing that was awesome. So, yeah, like there's just so many positive elements coming out of that from an offensive perspective. And then, you know, we'll probably talk about this in a minute, but to see them be supported by the defense was I mean, it really was such an impressive game to watch. And I can't remember, since I've been covering the team, so for like 3 years now, seeing a game ever like this where there was so much adversity early and then they were able to overcome it. I mean, how many times have you watched a game here and it just, they're down by 2 scores and they're never really back into it? What was the other time?
There's one, and Spiro mentioned it on the broadcast. It's the You Like That game. It's it's 2015 Tampa, which was also before it was the You Like That game. It was the Code Red game because Gruden had said during the week it's Code Red. And then they were down 24-3, I think. Like, it was bad. And like the last score before they turned it around was like a Cousins sack fumble return for touchdown. Wow. And I remember being in the press box writing my post-game column about how not just the game was over, but the season was over. And like Gruden was going to get fired. And then they won. Because Jordan Reed lost his mind, and also Tampa lost their minds because they just stopped covering him. That's the only time. I mean, that's the last time they came back from this kind of deficit, as my guy Spirodita said on the CBS broadcast, and that's it. Like, other than that, you're right. And it was funny. I got a text from one of my buddies during the game, and he was like, "Oh, is Logan going to tell us the offensive line played well in this one too?" And this was later in the game, and I was like, are you watching the second half? Like, they turned it on, and that's what you like to see, the growth during a game, the ability to adapt and adjust during a game. Obviously, they'd like faster starts. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
But I think you said that well, of like they actually moved the ball pretty well early. They didn't finish. Then they figured out how to finish, and you keep grinding. And you know, last week my big takeaway is, hey, 60-minute football game, and in many ways, in very different aspects, that was the takeaway from this week as well. And as for wanting to watch all this stuff on tape, that's why you listen to the midweek pod, the film review podcast, out Wednesday mornings wherever you subscribe. All right, let's talk about the defense in the final 6 minutes and change that we have here. I guess we have a little bit longer because we had a 5-minute countdown at the start of this. We're going to do a 30-minute countdown. That means we have 11 minutes left of talking.
That meme with the numbers flying by.
Yeah, that's especially, bro. You've been talking about this game since for hours at this point.
Yeah.
All right. So the defense starts off. They should have listened to the Take Command pregame show. Yeah. What I say my key to the game was no explosive plays.
So that's something. Let me just say that real quick. Like, I love, as an analyst, I love when someone says like, oh, they need to limit explosive plays. They need to protect the football or whatever, you know, like the generic thing is. The question that I always wonder is, how are they going to do that? That is always my thing.
Wondered too the first quarter and a half.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think, did you listen to Ron's postgame by any chance? I'm not sure.
I did not get a chance to listen to that.
So we just listened to it on the show. And one of the things that came out of it was like, man, we had too many coverage busts early. and too many people not be where they're supposed to be. And I think that is, again, one of the brilliant elements of Sean Payton's offense is they know what they're doing in terms of cultivating play action shots. They got the one to Mims off of a double cornerback pressure. And again, you're getting guys in coverage there with different responsibilities and different allocation of coverage resources. So I think it's perfectly understandable that you bust that kind of unusual pressure look. But kudos to them too, man. Like everyone's talking about the adversity the offense faced. Like, way to settle in Daron Payne and just be like, we're done with this nonsense. Here's 3 consecutive baller plays.
Yeah, that's the start of the second half. Let's quickly talk about that first half though, and some of the things that go wrong. It's funny because somewhere Scott Turner is sitting at home mumbling under his breath, I thought this is why I like mesh so much. They get mesh on that touchdown play and those crossers and like there's a reason. Like we can make fun of it now, but like mesh is a great concept. You just can't run it every third down.
Correct.
And you have to scheme it up different ways, but they did a really good job of using that and getting the crossers and putting Cody Barton and Jamin Davis in conflict and making them talk to Kendall Fuller and whoever else is out there. And, when that stuff's happening fast, and it feels like Denver discovered what speed was between weeks 1 and 2 offensively.
Crazy.
But they just had a bunch of fast dudes running horizontally across the field and said, see if you can keep up. And the Commanders couldn't for a while. And the way that they settled in on the back end, like we'll get to the front end in a second, but the way they settled in on the back end and started to shut some of that stuff down, then obviously they clean up the big plays, the over the top stuff.
Yeah.
That's enormous in the way that plays out.
No, 100%. And again, I missed some of that. I had to listen to it in the car while I was driving from our show to the show that I do after the game. But I do think, like in terms of reviewing some of the film and some of the stuff that's on Twitter, like you just got punched in the face and then you couldn't quite settle in. And they had a really good game plan. Sean Payton did. And again, like you're talking about, it was a little bit different than maybe they expected, and they weren't quite ready for what they presented. But they were able to settle in and do a much better job in the second half. And I do think it's very closely correlated to how the defensive line played, because early on, I felt like the defensive line was a little quiet. They weren't quite in a rhythm. They didn't really quite have a feel. There was all this, play action and boots and rushing attack, and it kind of unsettled them. And that's what we, in the pregame show and in the week, that's what we talked about. But I think once the D-line kind of got a feel for what was going on, that was to me maybe the biggest factor in terms of settling everything down for the Broncos offense. It was just like, oh, well, we kind of have a feel for these blocks. We have a feel for the personnel that's out there. Now we know how to win, and we're just going to win, and good luck trying to beat that group when they're on a roll.
A couple of really good calls from Jack Del Rio, and that starts with the second half, the beginning of the second half. They're in, I think, for all 3 of that plays of that first series. I know for the first 2, I meant to go back and check the third down. I think they're in Cinco.
Sure.
And they get those isolated one-on-ones, and Daron Payne just absolutely murders the guard in front of him. Yeah. 3 plays in a row. Goodbye, good night, see you later. And they're off the field. And,
they got a great ET stunt, with Montez Sweat and Daron, where Sweat is great in the pressure and Payne gets his hand up and bats the ball down. Like, it was great. It was great to see. And again, like 2 weeks in a row now, the defensive line basically says, like, yeah, we're done with this. We're going to like put our stamp on the game in the third quarter of a football game. And then that switches the momentum and the dynamic completely. So,
right. And that's what I was going to say is like, the defensive line sets the tone. Well, and the tone that they set in the first quarter was get your ass kicked. Like Denver just marched down the field, including a ton of yardage on the ground in that first drive and just absolutely tore them to shreds. And you're like, there's no resistance here. Like you even make it hard. And then second half, like, oh, we've now set the tone. The tone is now we kick your ass. And Daron Payne was lead ass kicker. But also there was a key third down, I think, later in the game where like they call it's the one where Chase gets the sack chasing down in the red zone from behind. On Wilson. That's on a zone blitz. And again, like creating a one-on-one, he drops Montez out. Barton winds up coming.
Yes, that's right.
And Payne winds up on McGlinchey, and McGlinchey's like he's like, what are you doing here?
I know.
Where's the dude to my outs? Like he was all turned around, and Payne's
had a
able
bad
to get
game.
right up the field.
He had a rough game, especially blocking down on the slide protection on Daron. Like Daron was like, oh, you're not, you see me? Well, you don't see me now. Let me get a nice pressure here real quick. So, yeah, I think, again, and Jack didn't do anything crazy, but like what we talked about on the pregame show, like if you just do enough,
Right.
keep guys unsettled and make the quarterback hold the ball, you got enough good rushers out there that they're going to make something happen for you. And, you mentioned Chase, man. Like, I was so happy to see him back out there and perform at a very high level. Like,
he got better and better as the game went.
And more confident. And there was a couple times I was talking to B. Mitch while we were watching the game, and, he's high with this rush. I'm like, oh, man, that's old Chase. And then, like, the very next play, he's like, nope, we are crazy tight here. We're collapsing this down. Like, game over. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just nice
there
to
was
see him
there was
be
a
more
sequence towards the end of that game where he goes way high, and it's like Russ gets out, and I literally tweeted about it. So I could go back and like check the timestamp, but he goes high, and you're like, dude, come
Don't
on.
do that, yeah.
And then the next play, he goes right back inside, and he and John play a game up front. Chase loops inside, and Russ is like, well, got him again. And he doesn't realize that Allen's outside.
Yeah.
And John had looped back around. Russ realizes he has nowhere to go, and he goes right into, and that might have been the one where Chase and Montez wind up getting the half sack apiece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay. Well, if these guys can figure out how to rush together, and we talked about that in the pregame, how Payne and Allen love rushing next to Sweat because they can trust him to like cover. Like, hey, if I get washed inside, like you're going to go outside. Like we can play these games. We can stunt, we can twist, we can do all this stuff. And it took them about 2.5 quarters to figure out how to do it with Chase Young in a game. And if that's how they're going to rush as a foursome, good night NFL. Like they're not going to give up 30 points in any more games this year if they can rush like that for 4 quarters. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Josh Allen could very well put up 40 points on them next week. But if they can maintain that level, that's a different story.
Well, and even like, you mentioned the foursome. Like, I mean, James has a sack, Casey has a sack, like Abdullah Anderson has at least 2 pressures. You know what I mean? Like that.
Also had a ball hit him in the belly.
I know, I saw that. But all those guys working together, like it's not just the 4. It's like the depth pieces are playing well too. And then like even to your point, like there was one Chase goes high, he's way too deep. Russell scrambles. Next play, Chase compresses the pocket, and John does a great job of compressing. And there's nowhere for anyone to go. Russ tries to escape to his right. Chase runs him down and gets that shoestring tackle. So, yeah, man, it was just I don't know. It was just great to see that group kind of come to life and play with a great physicality, play with a great intensity. And I've talked about this with you a ton. I've talked about it on the show. Just them asserting a certain level of dominance and control is something that I think is slowly ratcheting this group into one of those groups that is the best in the NFL. And I'm not saying that lightly. Like the more they can do this, the more they can put their stamp on a game and say like, and it's not just production, it's the situations in which that production comes is so critical. So I'm really excited for Chase. Obviously Montez, I think he gets another sack and a half. Is that true today?
Montez second half.
So that's 3 for the year, which is
3
awesome
in 2
for
games.
him.
Yeah.
And then Duron being a beast, then John being John. Like it's awesome to see that. So good for that group. And I'm really excited. Like there's a couple things you come out of this game like extremely excited about. The defensive line is one, and I think the poise and composure of the team is the other, and Sam Howell's poise and composure specifically. So lots of cool things in this game.
For sure. All right. We have to do it at the end.
What are we doing?
No, I'm not even gonna do the long snapper rant. We've done the long snapper rant. Everyone gets the long snapper rant. No, what we have to talk about is the Hail Mary.
The Hail Mary. What about
it? What are we doing? Do we have to heart attack it? Can we not?
I guess we do have to. I knew it was going to be a heart attack when they completed the out route to Sutton.
Which was that even complete?
When I looked at it again, it's in slow mo. I was like, I think it was his right foot. Was it down?
It never gets down. And when it goes down, it goes down out of bounds.
And it was inside.
And Gene Steratore was like, he dragged his toe. I was like, no, he didn't.
Yeah, I was a little bit like I don't listen to it with the sound because I just like to watch, but I was like, that looks like it's not down. And I guess it's reviewed automatically within 2 minutes, right? Did they review it?
Theoretically, it sure showed a lot of replays. I don't know if they ever actually looked at it.
Sure. Yeah. So that was when they completed that. I was like, this is going to be spicy here for the last play, like because it's so much closer. You can make that throw, and then I think you get Forbes jumping up for the football. It's like, bro, like I know you want to get a pick, just knock that sucker down. It goes through it, like bounces off someone with him. Cam Crow's trying to punch it out. He punches it right to the guy standing in the back of the end zone. Like there's a reason, and we used to do this thing every Saturday walkthrough. They would do a Hail Mary, and the scout team would run down there and they'd fake a Hail Mary. And it used to drive me absolutely insane when the defensive back would jump up, even in the walkthrough, for an interception. I think it comes from when Mike Shanahan was here and Kyle was here. Because if the defensive back jumped up for the interception, they would do it again and again and again until he knocked it down. So some dude would think it's cool to get the interception to kind of start running back. They were like, no, we're going to do that again. You knock these down. You don't knock them up. You don't go for the interception. Knock them to the ground. And that has just been so ingrained in my mind that every team I went to when they didn't do that, I was like, this is terrible. They're not practicing this correctly. And this is the exact reason why you don't do that. Why you don't go for the pick, why you don't tip it up. Knock that puppy down, man. The game is over. Knock it down. And so, again, that kind of speaks to some weird primal, rookie through year 5 coaching that just was indoctrinated in me, but knock the ball down.
The key word is down. Knock the ball down. Because I was always like, why did you hit it? Just catch it. Then they can't catch it if you catch it. But then you see why. Because the ball goes right through a dude's hands or it gets knocked out and it starts batting on. If you knock it down to the ground, the game is over.
Have you ever been in, I don't know if you've ever done that before. I've been in a couple of those where you're jumping up for the football and everyone says, oh, dude, just jump up and catch it. It's going to be so easy. That thing is like a big mosh pit. And so you have no control over really where your body's going. So the idea that you can just jump up and catch it is kind of insane. Every once in a while you see it happen. But before the new PI rules, it used to be really aggressive at actively pushing you out of the way. And so again, just when the opportunity's there, knock the sucker down. And
Jay-Z, throw up the rock sign where there's not enough room for the ball to go in between your hands and swat it down. I tried to do that. I was very unathletic looking because I was trying to keep it within the frame of the camera, but just get it. Dunk it down.
Volleyball spiked that thing to the ground. So obviously doesn't end up hurting you totally, even though maybe a little close there on the
Benjamin St. Just he can do his celebration, but he got away with PI. Bad one. But hey, if they never should have had that in the first place, then because the Sutton catch wasn't a catch, then I don't feel bad about it. So
the ball never lies, right?
Yeah,
ball never lies.
And also, if there hadn't been a bad snap on the first field goal, none of it would have mattered. Okay, I did the long snapper thing. All right. That is our podcast for tonight, this evening. The live stream as we wrap at 9:47 p.m. That is Logan. He's going to go watch a bunch of tape over the next couple of days. I'm Craig. I'm going to watch as much as I can. And then we're going to reconvene on Tuesday morning. And by Tuesday afternoon, the full long pod tape breakdown extravaganza of this game will be out on YouTube and it'll be in your audio feeds on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the free Odyssey app first thing Wednesday morning. We'll then preview the Buffalo game later in the week, so make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform. Until then, Logan, good to see you. Many hours talking football. Apparently, we've reached the end of my ability to speak. I'm going to recover, and I'll see y'all on the radio tomorrow from 4 to 7. We get started right at 4 with our first segment, 10 observations. So don't be late on the Team 980. Until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later in the week for the tape breakdown.